In this video, we're going to show you to install the crank sensor on your Toyota RAV4 located behind the AC compressor. Using a 10mm wrench, go ahead and loosen the ground terminal on the battery. Pop that off and set it aside. Now I want to go ahead and remove the wheel. Use an 18mm socket to loosen and remove the lug nuts. We have a locking lug nut here, so I want to go ahead and remove all of these. Remove the wheel and set it aside. Removing the front splash shield here. This is going to be a series of 10mm screws across the front. There should be one right here. It is broken as well on our passenger side. Go ahead and use your 10mm or a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen and remove these. If you follow around the splash shield, there's a couple plastic buttons here. There's two more on the driver's side, two more on the passenger side. You want to go ahead and use your trim tool. Go ahead and remove these here. Ours has a mix of buttons here, so we know someone's already been in here. But go ahead and remove all of these here, and once you have all the plastic buttons out, you can go ahead and just remove the whole splash shield. Inside the wheel well, I'm going to go ahead and remove these plastic push pins. We're going to use our trim tool. Sometimes these are brittle and they can break. If they do break on you, just simply source out some replacements. There's going to be a couple more of these push pins along the bottom. Let's go ahead and remove those. On the bottom side here, I'm going to go ahead and remove the push pins. There's this one here. And there's normally one on the front side here. You want to go ahead and make sure you remove that one. Pull that cover off and set it aside. Now up on the front side of the engine here behind that splash shield, you're going to find the belt tensioner right here. It's a 14mm bolt in the middle. You can use a breaker bar and a socket if you can get the space in there. We're going to use a wrench. And we're going to move this counterclockwise. Now as this moves, there's a hole right here. And I'm going to use an Allen key and put that in there like that. We're just pushing it all the way. That'll hold the tensioner, remove the tool, and remove the belt. Now remember, before you remove your belt, it's always a good idea to go ahead and write down or draw the actual belt routing of all your pulleys and everything. That'll help you in the end when you're reassembling. Remove the upper engine cover by simply grabbing the edges and pulling it straight up. Now with the hood open, you want to go ahead and access this upper cover here. Now there's a series of plastic push pins holding it in place. You want to use a small pocket screwdriver, push down on the center, and then you can use your trim tool. Go ahead and get underneath and lift up that button. You're going to continue to do this for the rest of the buttons across the whole front. I'm missing one there. And you should have one on the upper right here. Ours is missing. Go ahead and slide this out from underneath the lip of the grill and set that aside. Across the top of this beam right here, there are going to be three 10mm bolts, one for the battery bracket, and these two here for coolant lines. On the battery hold-on bracket, there's another 10mm nut here. Go ahead and loosen that. You can remove it if you want. We just wanted to make sure that we had enough room to move this around. Now there's 4 12mm bolts that we need to remove. There's one here, one on the front side, and there's 2 on the other end of this here. Go ahead and loosen and remove these. We're going to use a wrench for the lower. Once you have these 2 out, go ahead and repeat for the other side. Now at this point, I want to go ahead and try and lift up this beam. The hood latch is going to come up with it, as well as these brackets. I'm going to pull these brackets off here. And then we'll just swing that off to the side. Along the top of your radiator and fan assembly, there's this cover. There's going to be 2 12mm bolts. There's one here on the driver's side. Loosen and remove that, and do the same for the other side. Then open up our expansion tank cap. So let's go ahead and drain our radiator. On the driver's side lower portion of the radiator, we're going to find this little valve. And we want to turn this counterclockwise. Here we go. And we do have a catch can underneath to catch coolant as it comes out. Ideally, you want to have the radiator cap off for this here, so it drains a bit quicker. But at this point here, we'll wait until this is drained out, and then we'll close that up again. With the radiator drained, go ahead and close this valve. Once it's bottomed out, just make it sure it's good and snug, and then go ahead and use a towel and wipe up any of the residual here. So we have our pliers on our lower radiator hose clamp here. Go ahead and work that back. Now we'll go ahead and work that hose off. Make sure you have a catch can underneath to catch any residual coolant that might be coming out of that. Now we need to remove this hose here. It is just behind the driver's side cooling fan here. Now this is pretty rusted and the tab broke on this one. So we'll cut this hose here and we'll remove the remaining piece of the hose from the hard line. With the radiator drained, we're going to come over to the passenger side lower portion of the radiator. And this lower radiator hose here we need to disconnect. So there's a clamp on the bottom. We need a pair of pliers here. We're going to pinch that. Open up that clamp, and we want to slide that back. All right, with that clamp moved back, with the hose clamp moved back, we're going to reposition our catch can. And then we want to reach up here and see if we can work that hose off of the radiator. Now, if you can't get your hand on there to go ahead and pop that off, you can use a small pry tool. Want to be careful not to damage the radiator. Use that pry tool while you pull on that. Along the lower portion here, there's going to be another hose that runs over, and there's a little clamp or a clip. I want to go ahead and disengage this here. Here we go. The tab released. Go ahead and push it back up and into place. Pull that hose out. If we follow the hose back, it comes into a little supporting clip here. And what we're gonna do is push that up and out of that clip. Now it might be kind of stuck in there. Just gently work that. Don't want to puncture the hose, but you can pop it out like so. On the driver's side upper portion of the radiator, want to separate this hose here. Use a pair of pliers. Move that back. Pop that hose off. And we go ahead and just push this back up onto the battery area. And we can follow over here. There's another coolant line right here. Pop that out. Follow it down. There is another retaining tab over here. Instead of removing the hose from the clip, we're just going to remove the entire clip. On the passenger side upper portion of the radiator, disconnect these two hoses. Now our clamp had broken, so we just removed it. If yours is not broken, just loosen it and slide it back. Go ahead and pull this hose off. Use your trim tool, and we want to separate the wiring harness from the fan assembly. With those disconnected, we want to separate the connectors from the fin modules here. So push in on this tab, just like the other side. Now we're going to take your AC condenser and you're going to pull it up and out of the tray along the bottom of the radiator. So you're going to see two exposed holes where the rubber grommets for the AC condenser fit into. Go ahead and grab that fan assembly with the radiator. Pick it up and push it towards the engine, and do the same here. And with a little bit of manipulation, we should be able to go ahead and lift this up and out. Being careful not to damage the AC condenser. Now on the back side of the alternator here, we have two connectors we need to remove. I'm going to go to this one first. On the side right here, you can actually pull this back a little bit. There's a little plastic push clip. You want to use your thumb, push on that and wiggle that off. On the top here, go ahead and just peel that rubber boot back. It's going to be a 10mm nut right here. You want to loosen and remove that. Remove that nut, and you can go ahead and grab that cable, pull that off. I'm gonna go ahead and put that nut right back on that stud so we don't lose it. And then just to the left, there is another wiring harness here with a plastic retainer. You can go ahead and release the plastic clip and pop the harness out. However, we're still gonna have to remove the bracket. So we're going to use our 10mm open end wrench and get to that bolt in the back there. Loosen and remove that bolt. Now we get the bolt out, and we can pull that harness away. Now if we follow that harness up just to the side of the valve cover here, there's a retaining bracket holding the harness to 10mm. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove that. Once you get that bolt out, I'm going to move that harness, and I'm just going to stick that bolt right back in there. Now to gain access to the lower bolt on the alternator, you have to go between the tensioner pulley here and the AC compressor pulley. We can use a 14mm deep socket through the wheel well and our ratchet. Let's go ahead and loosen that. And let's go ahead and remove it. So we switched over to a shallow 14mm due to clearance between the side fender well area and the bolt here. Okay, go ahead and remove that bolt, set that aside. Now on the front side here of the alternator, we're going to come around to the back, and down between the exhaust manifold and the alternator, there's a bracket using a 12mm bolt. We're going to use a shallow socket and an extension. Get that on there, and then we'll use our ratchet. So now that we have broken that loose, I'm just going to switch over to a power tool so I can go ahead and zip that out. Here it is. If we follow the wiring harness down, just to the left side, there is a wiring connector that goes to our AC. You can usually stretch your hand down there, push on the little tab, and then wiggle that connector off. We're just using our pliers here to do that, make it a little bit easier. And a little bit further down here, there's a little plastic retainer holding the lower portion of that harness. We're going to use our trim tool to go ahead and pop that off. If we follow the harness down, there's a little retainer right here. And our third and last bolt for the alternator itself is located on the top here. There's a 14mm bolt on the front side of it. It runs through here. We're going to use our swivel head gear wrench. Pop on in there. If you can get a ratchet in there, that would be fantastic as well. Now I just broke that free, and I can go ahead and spin that bolt out. It's a little bit tight, but you can do it. Just kind of finagle around the wiring harness here a little bit. Just got to push down the upper radiator hose a little bit to sneak that on by. There it is right there. Now our alternator is kind of stuck in there a little bit. It's probably due to a little bit of corrosion. Not a big issue. You can simply grab a pry bar, go between the alternator, and we'll just kind of start to work that free a little bit. Normally you can finagle this right around the harness. Go ahead and grab that alternator. As we pull the alternator out, the crank sensor wiring harness is attached to the bracket that it was securing the back portion of the alternator to the block. So we're going to use a pair of pliers to pinch and release the tabs on that bracket. To show you where this is, I'm going to use my needle nose pliers to reach down and touch it. It's right here. So you want to go ahead and use your pliers or whatever you have to go ahead and release the tabs on that and separate that harness. We now have our AC compressor here. There's going to be 4 bolts securing this here. There's one right here and one just to the left of it. Using our 12mm socket, extension, and ratchet, let's go ahead and loosen these. I'm just going to break these free, and then we're going to go ahead and loosen and remove the 2 lowers. With those 2 bolts removed, let's go ahead and get the 2 upper ones. You can see there the compressor just started to shift. I'm going to pull these bolts out. Grab this here and gently pull it away. Underneath the AC compressor, there's a single wire connector right here. We're going to use our pliers with our little hooks on here. We're going to push on that little tab on the top. Pop that off. Now we're using a 10mm shallow socket with our swivel and small extension. I want to try and loosen this bolt. We're going to pop the ratchet off of here and just spin that out by hand. Now you can see I still have the wiring harness attached to it. It's going to be easier to disconnect that once we get that sensor removed. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of rocking this. There's a rubber O-ring seal that is securing this into the engine. You want to be careful not to break anything off in the engine. So I'm just gently wiggling and prying with the pocket screwdriver in there. Here it is. There is a sensor right there. Just going to set that down, and I'm going to reposition and disconnect the connector from the sensor. Now that we have the sensor out with the harness, we're just going to push down on this tab. Grab that sensor, and you want to grab the connector, not the wires. I'm going to push down and pull that off of the crank sensor. Here we go. I'm going to take our crank sensor, and we put a little bit of motor oil on the O-ring seal on that. Slide that into place and push it in. That motor oil should help slide that O-ring and seat that in there. And take our 10mm bolt, line that up. So we just got our socket on there. We'll thread it in by hand. Now at this point, we want to go ahead and torque this down. It's going to be 7 foot-pounds or 10 Newton metrics. There it is. Go ahead and remove your socket and swivel. And grab that harness, slide that on. Next thing we want to do is bring up our AC compressor. And I'm going to take one bolt, feed that through into our tensioner, into that tensioner bracket. So you want to grab that AC compressor and just kind of jiggle it around. Make sure that bolt starts by hand. If you cannot get it started by hand, you need to evaluate that and find out why it is not, but you do not want to cross thread this. Once you have that in, go ahead and switch over to the upper one on the right hand side. Do the same here. Once you get these two top ones lined up and get the bolt started, the two bottom ones will pretty much automatically line up. So okay, we have the two upper bolts started. Let's go ahead and install the two lower ones. Let's go ahead and install our lower bolts. Make sure you get the lower bolt through the bracket. And once you get that through the bracket, we'll go ahead and get that threaded in. Now that we have all four of the AC compressor bolts started, I'm going to go ahead and snug those down. Going to torque down our 4 AC compressor bolts to 18 foot-pounds. We're going to lower our alternator down into position. Once we get into position, this wire right here has that little clip on it that needs to attach to the bracket that we just swapped over onto the new alternator. So I have my hand or my arm run underneath the exhaust manifold and around to the back side. There we go. Squeeze your hand down in the back here. We have our long bolt. I'm going to feed that through our alternator. All right, have the upper bolt fed through. Gonna thread that through into the other side. Now we don't want to tighten that. We want to make sure that the alternator still has some play to it. And we're going to install our back bolt now. I'm going to grab that alternator with the bracket, feed the bolt back in there. Okay, we have that bolt in. Once again, leave the alternator a little bit loose so we can go ahead and go up through the passenger side wheel well and get the lower bolt installed. Here we go. We're going to feed the bolt up and in. Ideally, you want to try and get this lined up and started by hand. Make sure you get in a few threads. Then if you can get your 14mm socket on there, we'll try and run that down a little bit. Now once that bolt bottoms out, you can go ahead and snug that down pretty tight. With the lower bolt tight, we can come up here and tighten down the rear bolt to that bracket. Once that bottoms out, just go ahead and snug that down. Put our gear wrench on upper bolt here. We'll go ahead and make sure this is nice and tight. So once that bottoms out, you can go ahead and snug that down pretty good. We now want to go ahead and install all of our wiring harness here. So we're going to start by putting the connector down on our AC compressor down below. Push that down. You can hear it and feel it click in place. Use a short little bolt for here. Just going to get that bolt started in there. And if you follow the harness up top, we have the bolt that we installed back into the side of the valve cover for the upper portion of the harness. Just want to snug this down. Doesn't have to be super tight at all. You just want to make sure that it's snug, holding that harness. And then back to the front bolt. Open-ended 10mm wrench. We're going to do the same thing with this. You just want to make sure that it's good and snug. All right, there it is. Remove the 10mm nut right here. Press it on. Install the nut. Once that bottom's out, snug it. Spin that rubber boot around, pop that on there. Let it harness, push that on. You're gonna feel it and hear it snap into place. Now the radiator itself will have pins as well that lock into some rubber grommets at the base of the cross member. So that's what we're going to try and do now, is get that lined up. And once that pops in, we'll then grab our AC condenser and transfer that into the cooling fan tray. Okay. We now have the AC condenser locked in to the cooling fan tray. We have the radiator engaged into the cross member underneath. At this point here, we'll go ahead and start connecting electrical connectors, hoses, and all the other components attaching to this unit. Install our lower hose here. Now you definitely want to inspect the hoses and inspect the hose clamps. Our hose clamp actually broke on disassembly, so we had sourced out a replacement. We have our expansion tank hose right here. Slide that over. Secure that. Now let's go ahead and start to install the rest of the components. Go ahead and pop that hose into the retainer. And if you follow this back, there's just a little plastic clip. Snap that in. Now you can start to route your fan wiring harness. Install the electrical connectors to the modules. That'll just keep that harness up and out of the way. Now in the lower portion of the radiator here, we have a transmission cooler line. We're going to remove our locking pliers. Going to install a new hose clamp because our other one had broke. feed that up. I'm going to slide our hose clamp up into position, and then we'll tighten that down. Anytime you're doing a job like this, you definitely want to inspect hoses, inspect your clamps. If they're worn, torn, beat up, rusty, now's the time to replace them. You do not want to end up stuck on the side of the road and doing the job twice. Okay, that hose is good and secure. On the lower passenger side, let's go ahead and install the radiator hose. Want to make sure that that hose is pushed in all the way. And use your pliers to go ahead and move that hose clamp back and into position. Okay, our hose clamp is all the way back, hoses secured. On the bottom of the radiator on that passenger side, go ahead and get that other hose installed in the retainer. Fold that over and lock it in. In the middle portion of the lower part of the radiator, we have this hose to pop in to this retainer here as well. Just kind of jam your hand up in there. Pop that hose in there. Here we go. On the driver's side, let's go ahead and install the main radiator hose onto the radiator. Once you have the hose on, go ahead and use your pliers to compress that hose clamp. Move that over into place. And it's definitely easier to access this from the top than it is the bottom. Here we go. Once you have your hose in place and that clamp is on, we're now secured. Install the upper molding here. Line this up. Install your 2 bolts. Just gently snug those down. They don't have to be super tight. I'm going to bring over our expansion tank hose here. Push that up. Just move the clamp up into position. And install our cross brace here. Now you have to manipulate the expansion tank line here a little bit because that fits on top of this. So just kind of manipulate that up and over. You want to get this lined up and get the bushings lined up with our radiator support. Push that down into place. And we'll get our bolts in. Once we get these 2 bolts in over here, repeat for the passenger side. Now, I'm not going to tighten those bolts down yet. I want to go ahead and get some other brackets secured here. So I'm going to bring over our battery hold down. Get that bolt started. And we have our expansion tank brackets here. Let's go ahead and get these bolts started as well. Okay. Now, when lining this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the washers from our bolts to the marks here. And it's going to help us line this up because this bracket, this cross member, has our hood catch or release attached to it. So as you bring that down, we can see that that's pretty much lined up perfect. If it's not, just move that bracket left or right to get that lined up. Then we can go ahead and snug things down. You can use your regular ratchet or your gear wrench here. I'm going to tighten down the 4 big bolts first, and then we'll go back and tighten down the smaller ones. Once that bottoms out, you do want to go ahead and make sure that's good and tight. And do the same for the other side. Once you have that secured, come back in with your 10mm. Go ahead and snug down that battery hold down bracket. Go ahead and just gently snug that into place. And the same thing here. Once the bolt bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. The brackets are designed just to support the cooling line. Secure the rear of the battery here. Now, when tightening this down, just kind of move that bracket, and once it stops moving, pretty much secure at that point there. You don't want to crush the battery. Just make sure that that cross member or cross brace secures that. So for clearance purposes here, I ended up doing a double wrench. My standard tool that I use for my belt tensioner is too long, and I don't have the clearance in here to get a full throw on this. There we go. That'll hold that tensioner back. Going to install our belt. Now, as I install this here, you can follow along on the schematic you have on the screen in case you did not write this down. Okay, this should be it. Now we have our belt routed. We have it going around the water pump here, comes around, loops around our tensioner, comes back down around our crankshaft and around. It goes over underneath our AC compressor, straight up and over the top of the alternator. And then it comes back down to the idler and goes underneath the idler pulley up in the top center, and it comes back over our water pump area here. Make sure that the belt is fully seated in all of the tracked grooves on every component. We can visibly see that. At that point, we can go ahead and put our wrench on here. I'm going to release a little tension here, pull our pin, and then we can go ahead and release the tensioner. Once again, do a final inspection. Make sure that bolt is routed exactly where it needs to be and in all of the grooves. Ours looks good. Install our shield here. In our case here, we had to source some replacement buttons because ours were fragile and breaking. We have these two in here. Let's go ahead and install the two on the bottom. Install the two retainers on the bottom. Install the splash shield. Now right here, there would normally be another screw. Ours is broken. But if you have your screw here, go ahead and install that. We're going to go ahead and repeat this for the driver's side. Now that we have all of our main screws sitting all the way across, I'm going to come back and tighten all of these down. Once we have all of these snug, we're now going to go ahead and start moving further back on the splash shield. Push up the splash shield. Install your plastic push pins here, and then one a little bit further forward. Go ahead and install your buttons for the back end here. Go ahead and install your wheel. Go ahead and torque down your lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. If you have locking key, make sure you put this back in the glove box or someplace secure with the vehicle. You know, with the expansion tank cap already off, go ahead and use a clean funnel. I'm going to go ahead and prepare to fill our radiator. Now on the side right here, we have a low right here. There's a little line, and the top would be filling up to the seam right here. So what you want to do is, before we install this front cover here, we're going to go ahead and start to fill the radiator, top it off, and we want to check for any leaks around the system before we install the cover. So go ahead and use the appropriate coolant for the vehicle and go ahead and fill. So we've go ahead and filled that up. We have our 50-50 mix of our coolant. It is now up to the fill line. Remove this here, install our cap. Secure that down all the way. I'm going to go ahead and clean all this up. Once you have the system topped off, do a quick inspection underneath the vehicle for any leaks. We're going to reconnect our battery, start up the vehicle, get up to operating temperature, and check for any other leaks under pressure. Go ahead and snug that down. Now with the vehicle running, you want to let it run for about 10 to 15 minutes. Let the engine warm up. You want to go on the inside of the vehicle, turn your heat to the on position. Wait for that thermostat to open up in that vehicle and suck in some more of this coolant. You want to go ahead and watch this here. As this drops down, go ahead and open up this cap. And you're going to top off your fluid through this way here. Once you've inspected everything and there are no leaks, at that point here, we're going to shut down the vehicle, install the upper radiator cover. When installing the front cover here, you want to make sure that the upper lip here, or the forward lip, goes underneath the edge of the grille. Tuck that in all the way around. Once that's in, go ahead and install all of your plastic retainer buttons. We're now going to go ahead and install an upper engine cover here. There should be 3 rubber grommets in a triangular pattern. Make sure that the rubber grommet is on this and not on the engine itself on the studs. Good, line that up, pop it into place. Now that we have the part installed, go ahead and take the vehicle for a test drive, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.